Hi, and welcome to another episode of Digging for Gold. I'm your host, Dan Goldberg, and today we have a fascinating guest with an incredible story. This is Barry Ginsberg,
Hello.
also known as Guinea to
Right.
me, someone else I've known for many, many years. And his story goes back decades. He has been on 60 Minutes, correct? He's been interviewed in Philadelphia Magazine.
Time Magazine.
There you go. And he's in this book that we're going to discuss why this book was written. And the easiest way to find out, by the way, is to ask Guinea, Barry Ginsberg. Tell us about this book. Tell us about this episode in your life.
Well, the book was written apparently a year and a half ago. I was reading the New York Times Sunday book review, and I see this Dr. Blameza, a picture of him, and I noticed that this new book was written about this Oman Ghana Trust. I haven't been involved in it in 35 years, but I was involved heavily.
It's and for those of you who want to do more research on this, go to Oman. I guess
OMAN.
it's OMAN Ghana GHANA Trust, and it's fascinating. And from what you told me before the cameras rolled, it's kind of still going on.
Yes.
Yeah. So, how did you get involved? What was
Okay.
the story?
All
And
right.
how much money was involved?
A lot. I got involved. I shared office space with another lawyer. I was an attorney by the name of Lenny Edelstein.
Yeah. Okay.
And Lenny told me about this deal. And we met in my office with Lenny and the American agent, Robert Ellis, with my father and I. And he told us about this trust. And it seemed so ridiculous and so wild. My father asked me about it, and he says, okay, we'll invest.
Well, what exactly was the trust?
The trust Ghana was called initially the Gold Coast.
Right.
And Kwame Nkrumah was its first president. Apparently, Kwame Nkrumah diverted billions of dollars in gold and diamonds from the country and put it in banks in Switzerland.
Wait, a corrupt politician?
Oh, yeah.
Never
Never
heard of that.
No, never,
Okay.
never. So, in order to, this principal, the trustee, Dr. Blameza, John Akab Blameza, was allegedly with Nkrumah on his deathbed and gave him the keys to open up the trust. In order to open the trust, there were several conditions that had to be made. He had to get the leaders of the Western tribes in Africa to agree, and he was going to develop Ghana with the money. And then there was the main thing was to get this diplomatic passport from the government of Ghana to Blameza so that he could go to the banks to open everything up.
Did anybody ask him why he didn't put all that money in banks in Ghana?
Not banks in Ghana, banks in Switzerland.
Yeah, but why didn't they put all that money in banks in Ghana so he wouldn't need a diplomat?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
know.
He wanted it in a Western country. I guess.
Western,
Right.
safe.
That's it. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So then what happened?
So initially, my father and I each invested $5,000 apiece. And my father did it as a whim, okay? Me, I kept investing more and more and more. And then friends heard about it, and they knew, based on myself and my father, they started investing. Our group invested a total of $2 million, approximately,
Wow.
over time.
Wow. So when did this start? What year was it about?
I think it started. I got involved in '83. It started, and Nkrumah died in '72. I guess around '74 it's really started.
Wow. So, and this guy was at the deathbed of Nkrumah,
Right.
Kwame Nkrumah.
Who died in Romania in exile
Oh,
because there was a
cool.
coup sponsored by our government to get Nkrumah out. He was a little toward the Soviet
Right, I get
thinking.
Yeah. So there was a coup. He was thrown out. And this fella comes in and says, I got the keys.
Right,
You and your group invest $2 million
right.
US dollars in what years? What year was that?
I got involved, I believe it was in '82 or '83.
Okay. So $2 million of 83 money
Right.
was, and I don't normally do this, but I happen to have an inflation calculator
Oh,
right
boy.
on my phone, and we're going to look this up so our viewers will go, how much really was that? And where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay, so let's put in 2 million in 1980.
'83, let's say.
1983. It's about 6.5 million.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So everybody knows inflation.
Right.
6.5 million. Okay. Even at whatever percent it is.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So at this meeting was the American agent by the name of Robert Ellis,
Right.
and he was a fast talker, and I didn't know anything about him at all, but we gave him $10,000 that day or the next day.
Wow.
Yeah, and Ellis became I became not friendly with him, but
Right. You knew him.
You knew
could
him.
give him a call.
I could always give him a call,
Right.
and he kept calling me. They needed this, they needed that.
Wow.
And then over the years, then we went to meet the trustee in London.
Oh, the guy with the keys.
Yeah, the guy with the
Okay,
key. And I went there with security because there were some threats, not against me, but there were threats
Against the whole.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I went with security. I had two guys for security, and we went to London to meet Blamisa.
Wow.
Now, Blamisa didn't meet with me. I was sitting in London for 5 days before he
didn't.
had an audience with me. So
I love the way you say that.
Yeah.
Like a king.
Like a
He's
king.
the king.
Oh, yeah.
In the
Oh,
audience. For
oh,
5 days you wait for him.
Absolutely. And he was
You're
at the,
giving him money, and he makes you wait.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So I finally meet with him, and we go into his hotel room. I think it was the Montcalm Hotel in London. And he had a suite, obviously, and the incense was burning, and the African music was playing. And we go in, and he greets me, Brother Ginsberg.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to make you rich. You're going to help me, and I'm going to help you. I said, okay. And I had a note for him to sign. Initially, the note was, I think, for $52 million, something like that. And he signed it.
Note meaning that's what you'd get back?
Back, right, when the trust was
Okay.
realized. So I went back to Philadelphia, and money was flowing to me. People just wanted to get, but my one thing was, I said, if you didn't have the money to lose, you can't invest. You have to be able to take the loss. It's very
Right.
tricky.
It's a registered investor.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. And money kept flowing. It just kept coming over. And I would give it mostly in the beginning to Ellis.
Wow.
And Ellis would apparently he was living in Switzerland and London. He was living the high life too at the time.
No kidding.
Yeah, right. He was
Right.
getting all this money.
Right.
And this was not just a Philadelphia thing. This
Right.
was an international thing.
Oh,
Because when
God.
when I finally went to London a few times later, and I went to they had an office in Piccadilly. Beautiful offices of the Bureau of African Affairs, it was called. And I went with two other lawyers in my office, and we basically ran the office fielding calls and waiting for Blamisa to come back to London. Went back to Ghana. He was arrested a couple times.
Wow.
Yeah, and so we were in London. I was in London for about 6 months.
Really?
Yeah, my daughter learned how to walk in Hyde Park.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So you stayed there the whole time waiting to talk to him.
We'll talk to him, waiting for the money. It was going to be released very shortly.
Always very short.
Always very shortly.
Always.
But then always a coup.
Always a coup.
Always a coup. Government changed in Ghana several times.
I had an experience like that in Nigeria
Right.
where we were doing
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a coup. And
Right.
my partner was never heard from again.
Right.
So, yes. So continue, if you would.
So we were in London, and we just hung around. And I went to Ghana at one point. And I met the current president, Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings, in Ghana.
The current president of Ghana?
Of Ghana.
So you know the current president
Yeah,
now?
not today. I
The
mean,
current
back
one
then.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Jerry Rawlings passed away already.
Okay.
So I met with him, and he assured me that everything was going to be okay, and then he was thrown out, you know. So
I do know. By the way, I do know.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
And we just hung around. And then I'd came back to Philadelphia a couple times, and then went back to London. And I would get calls from Ellis, you have to go meet the bankers in Switzerland the next day from Philadelphia.
Oh, my God.
So I was always on call. It was...
So you were like the head of things here.
Yeah, basically, my
Under
group.
Ellis.
But other groups wanted to put their notes with me.
I got it. Were there groups in other cities?
Oh, all over. Oh yeah, all over.
So your $2 million was only the
Tip.
tip of it.
Tip of the iceberg.
So there was
Hundreds of millions of dollars invested.
going to a bank in Switzerland.
No,
In London?
going to Ellis in
Ellis,
America
right.
and Blamisa in Ghana or London or Switzerland, wherever he was.
So you really didn't know where the money was going,
No.
bank-wise.
No, we knew that we were paying for Nkrumah's, not Nkrumah, Blamisa's lifestyle, you know, his fancy hotels, the limousines, and Ellis was living pretty high off the hog. And we were also, while we were in London, playing for, I met Prime Minister Nkrumah's wife, and her daughter was in a private school at the time. We were paying that off. We were paying for her apartment.
And where was the private school?
In London.
In London.
Yeah, everything was.
Whoa. Okay.
So this was going on for a couple years, and I finally had it. I went about 2 years in, 2.5 years in. I had questions because it seemed like every time we were going to get paid, there was a delay of some sort, either a coup or something else. The Western leaders of Africa in Ghana had to be paid off or whatever. So I got a little bit antsy, and it started questioning Ellis a lot. And we had meetings with Ellis all the time at the bar in Germantown, Ben Bynum's bar.
Oh, yeah, sure. I know Ben.
Yeah, you know.
I knew Ben.
You knew
And,
Ben.
yeah.
And Ben was an investor. And then I had a chance to meet former Attorney General John Mitchell.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah,
John
from
Mitchell.
Watergate fame.
Yes, from Watergate.
And
fame,
he
that's right.
was involved in it.
Really.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You're getting new information right now.
Right
this
now.
is amazing. Okay.
Right. I'm
Is
trying.
it in the book?
I don't.
I don't think he might not be
He
in the
might
book.
not be.
Yeah,
I think he might be.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to remember back 35 years already.
I get it. So you got John Mitchell.
I met John Mitchell, and he assured me, Barry, everything's fine. I met him in Washington. Everything's okay. Don't worry about anything.
Wow.
And then there was a Bob Schulman, who was also like an agent for the Oman Ghana Trust, who lived in the main line of Philadelphia.
An agent.
Yeah, an agent. Yeah, along with Ellis. We were
Right.
giving money to both of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Mitchell knew about the whole
Oh,
thing.
Mitchell knew everything.
Attorney General.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And there was this Walter Haddock, who was a businessman from New Jersey that invested. That was who initially I met in London. And he invested $7 million.
Wow.
And I met him in London, and he reminded me of a big guy, boisterous. He reminded me of an ugly American.
Right. Yeah. From the book. There was a book.
Yeah,
by
there
the
was
way,
a book and a
called The
movie.
Ugly American and the movie.
Right.
Correct.
And he, Barry, everything's going to be okay. And I've been to Ghana a few times. And what we didn't know at the time, Blameza was a student at University of Pennsylvania, allegedly. And he worked at the Sheraton Hotel.
On campus. I know where that
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
It's off campus. but
Yeah,
it's
and then he stole money from one of the hotels, and he was sent to Graterford Prison
Really?
back in the early 70s, mid 70s. And
Well, so-
Ellis, that's how Ellis got involved. Ellis had met him and got him out of jail. That was the connection with Ellis.
But you found that out later.
Later on.
That he went to Graterford's prison in the Philadelphia area.
Right.
I think it's a maximum security, but I'm
It
not
is
100%.
maximum
Yeah.
security.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't know that till later. And then it kept going on, and I'd get calls at 6 in the morning. You have to be in Switzerland the next day. So Barry Ginsberg didn't like to take the regular flights to London, the 6-7 hour. So I went to New York and got on the Concorde a few times.
How was that, by the
That
way?
was wonderful.
3 hours you're there.
2.5 hours.
2.5.
And one time I'm sitting in the plane, and people are coming up to the person in front of me, getting autographs, and I go to the steward. They only had stewards on no stewardesses, and I said, "Who is this guy?" "Oh, he's a musician by the name of Sting."
Wow.
This is in 1982, 83. I didn't know from Sting,
But you did know about a sting that you were involved
right?
in.
Yeah,
Right.
real Sting.
A real sting, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was always on edge, and my work at my office
Right.
was
dissipating.
It was dissipating because I wasn't thinking. I wasn't.
Right.
I had lawyers working for me, but it wasn't the same. I had to focus, be more focused there, and I wasn't at the time.
Yeah. They wanted you.
Right.
Some clients
Right,
wanted you.
right.
And they got
The
associate.
employees, right, associates. So it went on for years, 3 years, and I went to Live Aid, which was at JFK Stadium
I
in
was
Philadelphia.
there. I was there.
And something hit. Now, before it hit me, I became very friendly with the finance minister from Ghana under Nkrumah, a guy by the name of Mr. Amoka Atta. We became friendly. We'd always talk, and I'd see him at the offices and everything. Amoka Ada was dying. He had cancer. And I went to visit him in the hospital. I think it was in 84 or 85. 85 it had to be.
In
Because
what
Live
coun-
Aid was in 85.
Yeah. In what country?
Huh?
Here?
No, in London.
London.
So I went to visit him, and on his deathbed, he said, "You know, Barry, this is a scam." I said to him, "I had a feeling. I wasn't entirely sure, but thanks for letting me know."
Wow.
And he passed away the next day. Now,
Wow.
that was a big deal. Amoka Ada led a lot of credibility to this trust because he was the finance minister under Nkrumah. So we met at the office, and they had to have 3 funerals for Amoka Ada. One in London, one in Accra, the capital of Ghana,
Right.
and one in his hometown.
Wow.
Okay. Now the cost of this was going to be $140,000 for these funerals. And at that point, I said to the 2 lawyers that were with me,
They asked you for the money?
"Oh yeah, yeah." They asked me for the money. A couple other people, but me. And I said to the other associates of mine there, I said, "I'm going back to Philadelphia." And I flew back. And 2 of the lawyers stayed, and I said, "You have to come back to work."
Right.
"Oh, we're going to work for the trust." I said, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" And I told them my conversation with Amoka Ada. One of them stayed, and one came back.
Who paid them?
I was paying them while they were there.
So you were paying them while they were working
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
trust?
they were working for me at the
Wow.
time. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
This is fascinating.
Now, let me go back. I'm remembering things.
Yes, absolutely.
I was a runner back then, and I'm
Literally running on
running,
the street.
yeah, running in Hyde Park one day, and I met this beautiful woman, and we started talking, and then she says, "I'm here to meet. I was here sent to meet you." I said, "You were sent to meet me?" He said, "Yeah. Who are you?" "Oh, I'm in M5, I think it was at the time.
Oh.
British intelligence." They knew what was going on.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
Yeah, they knew what was going on. And I hate to say it, but we struck a romantic
Situation.
there.
Right.
And, I was married at the time, and I regret doing that, but it happened.
It happened, yeah.
It happened. And one weekend, I'll tell you a funny story as I look back at it, where she wanted to take a vacation. She said, "Get out of London for a little bit." So we went to this Tenerife, which is off the coast of Africa. So I'm there with her and 2 other American people.
From the government?
From the government, yeah. And we're in the elevator on the 7th floor of the hotel, and we're coming on our way down to dinner, and these 2 German guys turned around and looked at me and said, "You're Jewish, you shouldn't be here." I said, What are you talking about? "You have to leave." Well, we had a little altercation in the elevator, and it was just like in the movies. When we got to the lobby, these 2 Germans were laying out cold on the floor. And the people, I told the person in the lobby what happened, and it was a he. He laughed, and he said, "Don't you know Tenerife is used by Germans? They vacation here. This is our
Really?
major." I said, "How the hell do I know? I don't know."
Wow.
Yeah.
So did you see these 2 guys again?
Never again. Never again. We only stayed for a few days.
That's it.
But that was a funny story. As I look, it wasn't funny at the time.
Right. You had to lay them out.
But as I look back on it, it was a riot.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. There was a lot of crazy stuff that went on in London. I was a gambler, and this MI5 person, you had to belong to these gambling clubs in London at the time. So we went a few times. I didn't gamble a lot.
Right. Well, you were gambling on this whole thing,
On this, and
on the trust.
later I lost a lot of money in Atlantic City gambling.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
I do remember that, Kenny.
Yeah.
So here you are,
Right.
and you now know it's a scam.
Right.
Okay. Unequivocally.
Unequivocally.
Because the finance minister tells
Right.
you that.
And I had the feeling myself.
And then what happens?
So I fly back to Philadelphia, and I go to Live Aid, which was at JFK Stadium in 1985. It was a Saturday, hot as hell. I'll never forget that.
I remember it very well.
I remember Mick Jagger with Tina Turner.
Tina Turner. By the way, my mother loved that when I was there.
Right.
And when the next day when I went to see my mother, she said, Tina Turner and Mick Jagger, they were the best.
The best.
She watched the whole thing.
Yeah, it was a great concert. And
It was.
Phil Collins took the Concorde to play in London and Philadelphia.
And Philly, right?
So the next day, I figured, enough's enough. I called the FBI. It was a Sunday. I said, I want to report a large scam, probably the largest in Philadelphia. We're closed. I said, what? You're closed? The FBI's closed? So the next day I'm walking to work, and I run into Billy Wolf, who was in the district attorney's office, economic crime unit, happened to be. I was a friend of him, of his. And I tell him the story, and he's looking at me like, are you high? Are you drunk? Barry, let me go back a little bit.
Okay.
The night before, I'm at Elan, which was a club in
remember,
Philadelphia.
the Warwick.
At the Warwick in Philadelphia. And I got a little buzzed, and I'm driving on Walnut Street, and a hooker, it was a hot day, I'll never forget, and she grabbed my wallet out of my pocket as I'm stopped for a stoplight.
Wow.
Okay, so I stopped the Philadelphia police car. We get in the car, and he's looking. He said, you better go to 21st and Hamilton.
Really?
Central Detectives.
Okay.
So I go to Central Detectives, and this African-American sergeant shows me books of hookers, 3 books, and I go, they all look alike. And he said, what did you say? I said, they're all black. I couldn't tell one from the other.
Right.
So he starts yelling at me like I did something wrong.
Right.
Overhearing this are 2 detectives who come in, one named Phil Silverman and the other one Lieutenant Bob McGee. And they hear the commotion, and they're hysterical. They're laughing.
Because the original detective took great offense at that.
Right.
Right?
But
it's like somebody saying everybody looks alike.
Right.
Whatever they are, Jews,
right,
Asians,
whatever.
Yeah.
So they said, get in your car, and we'll follow you. We'll look for this particular. Well, I get in my car, and as I said, I was a little buzzed. I ran into a tree on the parkway. And they're in back of me, and they're laughing. Barry, you better go home. At the time, I lived at Parktown Apartments, 22nd in the Parkway. I lived there for 30 years. So I go home. So the next day, I run into Billy Wolf. I tell him the story. And he says, I'm going to take you to my boss, Joe Casey. So I go to see Joe, and Joe's looking at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, a lot of judges have invested in this scam, a lot of professionals in the Philadelphia area. He said, okay, I'm taking you to Ron Castile, who was the the DA at the time.
Yeah.
So I knew Ron. So I walk in his office, Barry, how you doing? What are you doing here? And I tell Ron the deal, what's going on, and he's looking at me like, Barry, you putting us on? I said, Ron, why?
They all think you're crazy.
Yeah, they think I was out of my mind. They thought I was crazy. And I said to Ron, why would I make up something like this? For what reason? He says, I'm going to get you the best detectives. We're going to look into this. who walks in? Phil Silverman and Bob McGee. And they go, Barry, how are you? And Ron Castile says, how do you know Barry? Oh, it's a long story. So they were the two detectives on the case, okay? So they investigate.
You never found this prostitute?
No,
okay.
no. My wallet was gone.
Yeah.
So they start investigating, and it's taken them like 6-7 months, and they're interviewing a lot of people. But I was the main point, and I became friendly with these guys. I had season tickets for the hockey, for the Flyers.
Right.
I used to go with them. I used to take them, and we became good friends.
Wow.
And finally, I'd say about 7 months later, they get an indictment for Robert Ellis, the American agent. Under the Pennsylvania Securities Fraud Commission, which was the first indictment ever used for this.
Wow.
Yeah, I met with them, with the Pennsylvania Securities Commission, and they indict Ellis under that act, and trial set. Okay. In the meantime, I get a call from Customs. You're the complainant in this case. We need your help.
Wow.
You need your help for what? We want you to wear a wire.
Wow.
I said, for who? For what? This Robert Schulman.
Oh.
We want you to go over there and get as much information from him as you can. So, me, having nothing to worry about at the time, and I'd been through so much, I said, I agreed to wear the wire. So we go to Harrington High School, and it was funny because I saw about 6 black cars, and all the FBI and customs agents were wearing white sneakers. It's like a uniform for them. They wire me up, they test the microphone, and I said, you better... Schulman has guns.
Right.
So I go talk to Schulman, and for over an hour and a half, I get out of the meeting, and I go on my microphone. I said, I'm done. No response. Yeah.
What?
No response. I go back to Harrington High School. Nobody's there.
What?
Yeah. So I go back to Parktown. As I'm entering my garage, about 10 cars surround me and say, Barry, we're so sorry we lost contact with you. I said, great. Great. I could have been killed. Well, as I look back, it's funny.
Right.
All of it's funny at this point.
Exactly. It's part of life.
It's part of life. I was a nice Jewish boy from Mount Airy, and I got involved in this international. Now, I met a lot of people in London from Korea, Japan. They were all investors.
Yeah, so then you made new friends.
Yeah, and as I said, I met John Mitchell.
Right.
And I met a lot of interesting people.
So in the end, okay, how did it come to an end from your side?
Okay. So Ellis was indicted. We go to trial. I'm going to the courthouse, and his attorney and I are in the same elevator. His name was Tony DeFino, who later became the nicest guy in the world. I knew Tony prior to this, and he says to me, Barry, what do you think, probation? I said, Tony, you know who the judge is here? Oh, Len Abraham. I said, forget about it. There's no probation here. So I walk in the courtroom. You have to realize, on one side. Now, wait a minute. Let me go back a little. The summer before. My parents had a house down the shore in Atlantic City. And I'm with my daughter. And we had a hot tub in the backyard. And I'm in the hot tub. My mother's outside. And these guys with cameras come by. And I'm going... Okay. And they tell my mother we're doing a documentary on old Atlantic City. So I had a basement apartment at the house. I grabbed one of them. I said, "Who are you?" FBI.
Wow.
I said, "There's been threats on your life. We're going to watch you." So wherever I went that summer,
These guys were there.
these guys were there. They rented a house across the street.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a little crazy. But what happened when we go to trial, I told you we were talking to Tony Fifino, and Lynn Abraham's the judge. On one side are a lot of investors, and they're pissed at me because I'm the one that's destroying their dream.
Right.
On the other side of the DA's office, Customs, FBI, and other people.
Right.
And oh, I didn't tell you. Let me go back again.
Okay. Okay.
When I first, when the DA's office and the detectives started working on this case, they called the federal prosecutors, and they wanted cooperation. None. No cooperation at all.
From?
None.
From who?
From the feds.
Wow.
No cooperation. And there was some reasons which I
Right.
can't
Right.
disclose. But yeah,
I can imagine.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So I did know one of the prosecutors, and I go to the office, and he said, "Barry, let me show you something." And there was a stack of papers like 4 feet tall. I said, "What's this?" He said, "It's about the Oman Ghana Trust." I said, "How did you get that?" Shirley Temple Black, the actress, was the ambassador to Ghana and knew all about this going on for years. And he apparently told Henry Kissinger about it.
And they didn't do anything.
They didn't do
about
a
it?
thing. Nothing. Nothing was ever done.
Oh my God.
Nobody. So, back in the courtroom, there's two sides. One side's filled with these investors, and they're giving me the evil eye and this, And I've had threats against me, and I just, whatever, shrugged them off.
They were big boys when they gave you the money.
Yeah. So Lynn is there, and he pleads guilty to Pennsylvania securities fraud, and is sentenced for 5 to 15. Tony DeFino's glasses fell off. He was like in shock. But then Lynn said, "No restitution."
Wow.
So after the hearing, I run into Lynn on the street. I said, "Lynn, why no?" He said, "Barry, do you really think there's any money left?" I said,
Right.
"You're probably right.
Yeah.
There's nothing."
Nothing left.
So that was that. It took a few years. Then I get a call from Ed Bradley from 60 Minutes. They want to do an interview with me. And I tell him my last name, and he said, "Are you related to Stan?" I said, "Yeah, that's my father." He said, "You better call him before you." So I talked to my father. He said, "Yes, Ed's a good guy."
Ed's from Philly.
And then my father said, "Barry, it could go one of two ways. It could be very good or bad." I said, "I'll take my chance. I've taken enough chances. I'll
Right.
roll the dice on this." So I was interviewed by Ed at the Warwick Hotel, as a matter of fact, and it went very well. As a matter of fact, I saw a 20% increase of business after it,
Wow.
because people thought, here's a guy that was scammed but had the balls to report it to the authorities and go forward with it.
Right.
Okay. Now, the next day that it aired, the day after, I go to Woolworths to get an ice cream or frozen yogurt, and everybody's pointing. I go, "Yeah, it was me. It was me." Now, that particular episode was one of the highest rated in 60 Minutes history. It was repeated for 5 years straight.
I wonder if we can find it on YouTube.
I think it is on YouTube.
I'm going to look it up.
Yeah.
This has been an amazing interview. Amazing.
Yeah, I'm glad I could.
Wow.
And I live to tell about it.
And you live to tell about it.
And I'm happy today.
Yeah, and you got to be happy.
I went through torture.
You can't regret anything.
No.
Because what good does it do?
It doesn't do any good.
No. So you may as well enjoy it.
I enjoy it. People still come to me and say, "Oh, whatever happened?"
Like we were talking about.
Right.
A couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So in this book, Barry Ginsberg is mentioned. I have my little tabs here. You go, if you want to get this book and read about the Oman Ghana Trust, and you go to the index and you'll see Barry in the pages.
I was never interviewed for the book.
Yeah, never interviewed. This is like secondhand information that this woman did.
This book was printed a year and a half ago, and when I saw it on the New York Times bestseller, I was in shock. And I said to my wife, "Look at this." Now, we weren't together while I was involved in the,
Listen, I want to thank you for this.
Oh, thank you. Good.
This has been my pleasure to have you on. Folks, I hope you really enjoyed this episode. Maybe we'll get Barry back for another one.
Sure.
The continuation of this. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe. Actually, there's a subscribe button in the right-hand corner. And if you have any comments for me, for Barry, put your comments in below, and I'll pass them on to Barry, and he'll respond. Hopefully, we'll do that in a good amount of time. So don't forget, I'm on TikTok at Bearded Brilliance. I'm on Instagram at Bearded Brilliance for you. And, of course, on YouTube, at Dan G for you too. And this is Digging for Gold, the episodes. Thanks again. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
And we'll see you at the next episode. Thanks.